Allora, riprendo la parola e vi ringrazio per...
So I'd like to thank you for attending this session about the presentation of a book on frame design. Well, the book is in particular about the very first attempt to rationalize the world of nomenclature. First of all, I would like to thank the speakers who before me have discussed and described with great competence and knowledge our sector. I'm an optician, and being a professional in the field, I'm striving to understand the rationale behind the market dynamics. And two elements were mentioned by the previous speakers. One is knowledge, and second one is the description of matter with, in my opinion, imprecise words. We often talk about glasses, although we manufacture frames, or we are in the sector of lenses, and all people mention astigmatic lenses, but there are no astigmatic lenses on the market. These are toric lenses. So the very first goal that we should all try to reach, at least, well, this is my opinion, is to understand who opticians really are, because we all have to start from the fundamentals, from fundamental elements. Otherwise, we would be overwhelmed by technologies. Technologies will overwhelm our entire life, both professional and private. But if we do not understand this, we will never be able to succeed with mere marketing techniques. If I ask a professional who the optician is, I will never have a single answer. And if I get an answer, this answer will always be partial. The most frequent answer you would get is that an optician is the one who assembles glasses. And this is nonsense. It's like making a comparison between shoes and frames. But are we crazy if we compare shoes with glasses? Well, we cannot compare something which accounts for 85% of social life, of relationships, with a pair of shoes. Well, I feel offended, but I have to realize, and I must realize, that opticians haven't understood that they manage 85% of the life of a human being. So if I ask who is an optician, well, I can tell you who an optician is, because an optician is the one, a person who manages the vision. Is this enough? No, it's not, because we have to add through time. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So I have to manage the vision of the person who is in front of me. Managing vision means allowing a person to see well, and to see well for persons who already see well, or a person who is ametrope. If I have a friend who plays tennis, what should I recommend to him? Well, nothing, but we should plan and design a pair of glasses for him to see properly on the tennis field. So if I manage the vision, I manage the vision of everyone, so that when you get out of the store, you can see well. So a customer of mine is no longer a customer of mine as soon as he reaches his goal. And this is the very concept that we should all stick to. The way you see your vision is a marketing concept, but before that we have to understand what we are, because if we do not know what we are, nothing makes sense. And that's it. Let me stop here. Based on this, we should redefine what we mean by innovating. Innovating doesn't mean changing a car, changing a brand. Innovating means dynamically changing the way we are and what we are in our world. And why that? Because at the very moment when emails are invented, my way of being must change. Well, this is a trivial example, but that's the way it is. I must have the knowledge and have to have the deepest knowledge of what I'm selling. And I can reach this deepest knowledge provided that through language I'm able to tell the story that Pregliasco mentioned. And I have to do so not in terms of a historical event, but by using a precise language for the historical event I'm telling. This is important, and this led me to write a book on frames. It's a difficult task because there are no benchmarks, both in German or in English. It's a first attempt to make order. And the greatest effort, the first and greatest effort, well, it's an effort, and I hope it's fairly correct. Well, the first and most important effort was that of reviewing and correcting the language. Only by correcting the language, only by using the right language, we can tell true stories. Otherwise, we tell stories that seem to be true and real, but they will not be retained by people. And so the first thing I did was to write the definition of a frame. I asked myself, what is a frame? And the answer is, a frame is a speaking, styling object. So it's a speaking, styling object. A frame is not a pair of shoes. I'm sorry, but frames have a life for their own sake. And here in this room, here at this exhibition, we still hear people saying that glasses are all the same, and no one is shocked, and no one criticizes that. Let me quote. And let me tell you the story of Amilcare Carruga. So Amilcare, having to choose a type of frame, by instinct, he opted for one of the thinnest frames. No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong passage.
Minimizzatrici, nient'altro.
Minimizing. So just a pair of very thin side pieces that support the lenses through a nosepad. He went on for a little bit, and then he realized he was not happy. If he inadvertently looked at himself in front of the mirror with a pair of glasses, he didn't like his face. He thought as if this face belonged to a category of people who were so distant from him. But this was due to the glasses. He was a spectacle wearer, as if he wore glasses for his entire life. So those glasses were part of his look, so they were embedded in his features without any contrast between his face and the pair of glasses. It was any face, but in any case it was a face, and a pair of glasses was an industrial item. He didn't like them, so he often broke them, and he had to buy another pair of glasses. This time he chose for a different pair of glasses with a black plastic frame, with protruding hinges, metal hinges, side pieces that were so heavy that they could even bend the ears. It was a sort of a mask hiding half of his face. But underneath these glasses, he felt at ease. There was no doubt that he was one thing and glasses were another thing, completely separate from each other. It was clear that he wore glasses only occasionally, and without glasses, he was a completely different man. He came back as long as he could, and he was happy again. Can a pair of shoes generate the same effect? Of course they can't. But, well, clearly, if we show 10 different frames that non-educated people consider all identical, we must realize that these 10 frames are all different from one another because they have the hysterical, the exoterical power to allow people to feel their identity expressed through this frame, and so that the frame can communicate his feelings, emotions and personalities to the person in front. And why that? Because with the design that we develop, the colors, the shape, whatever you want, a face looks differently. And this is the very first thing that you should look at. That's why when you have to buy a frame, you resort to your neighbor, to your friend, to your wife or husband, asking how do they fit? And that's why a frame is not an accessory. That's why a frame is not a belt or a pair of shoes. A frame is an item, is an object that defines and limits your personality, both consciously and unconsciously. Consciously because you choose it. And it cannot be considered as two holes holding a side piece, but it's a high-tech object. And let me tell you a story about this. Unfortunately, the person left, so, well, a person got into... Oh, Paul is here. Do you remember that? So, and you told that a friend of yours wrote a book on frames, and people wondered about what should you tell about frames. But actually, you can tell so many things on frames that a book can focus on just one single topic. We tried to put all them together with a sort of summary, and we hope the result is a positive one. But remember that the importance of a frame is not for its own sake, but only in order to be communicated. And it's not by chance that this book was chosen by a university so that it could be published, and the colleagues with whom I worked decided to pick 3 chapters on communication, the use of materials, and design. And this is because frames are a very complicated world that communicates emotions and feelings. So again, frames are an object with their own identity. But then we wear glasses. We do not wear a frame, because glasses are a lens and a frame. But it's the frame that defines the appearance of a person. Well, and that's the mystery that explains the reason why we can wear a certain type of frame and we're not willing to wear another one. It's like a pair of shoes. That's why we can wear some shoes and others do not fit. I'm oversimplifying. So I tackled many different topics. Of course, there will be some imperfections, and the experts in the field may forgive these mistakes. It's, again, a very important attempt, but it's an attempt that wants to be an invitation, because, you know, we organize conferences and events, but if you don't study, if you don't know, if you don't have the knowledge, everything we say is simply an exercise of reflection among experts in the field. And this is one of the issues that our industry is confronted with. Again, as I said, well, again, I come back to this major effort that I made, nomenclature, language, and I insist on that because using proper language means giving the impression that you perfectly know about the problem that you are explaining. A rather imprecise frame often gives the impression of not being credible, of not being professional. But let me add another thing, which is likewise important. You must buy this book. Then you can also read it, but you first have to buy it. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry if I was boring.
Buongiorno a tutti e bentrovati.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. When they asked me to introduce this book, I'm a talkative person, and I thought, well, speaking in public, I love it, but then I read it, and I had so many new ideas. It speaks about insights through specific methodologies and methods, thoughts, and a whole new world opened up to me. And I'd like to give the floor to the writer of the book. And if we have doubts at the end of the contribution, we can ask questions. Thank you so much, Isabella. Good morning. Namaste. It's a way I've always used to thank all those listening to me. It's a wonderful message that pays tribute to you. August 2012, I was in Austria, and I was walking along the shores of this river. I saw somebody that was making such sculptures with such stones. It was a cold, grey day, despite it was August, low temperature. I approached that person and I asked that person, what's the secret? And this person looked at me and told me the secret is the last stone. And the last stone is the secret of communication, if you think about it, because right communication, in a way, can enhance a product, can enhance a service, the presentation of ourselves, or if it is not done correctly, it can harm you. Public speaking should be the same. If you introduce yourselves, you spoil the work you've done, the work of other people, and the work of a whole company. That's why it's so important, and it's fundamental to me. I'm Max Galli. I've been dealing with communication for 30 years. This year, I created a middle communication and middle images. In the course of my career, I worked for so many brands. There it is. Brands that allowed me to experiment, to do wonderful things that made me grow. And speaking in public, to me, has always been something easy. I like to stay on the stage. I had different types of experience, but it has not always been so, because when I started, I opened my vet number in 1991, and this picture, when my daughter saw it, she told me, "Dad, it's not you." And I told her, "Why? No, Dad, it's not you. He's so good looking." And I told her, "Thank you, Nicole, I love you." So I started in 1991, and I was lucky because I worked immediately for major brands and record covers for Mina Celentano. And so I was working at the top, and I thought I was introducing my products and myself correctly. Actually, it was not so. I never put myself into question. My first time was when I faced an important audience, an audience that I was a juror at a competition of a major Italian bank, and on the day of the award-giving ceremony, I had such an audience. The president of the jury didn't come, the publisher of the magazine didn't come, and it was me with two representatives of the bank. They knew nothing about the contest, and at a certain moment, one of them said, "I give the floor to Max Galli." I had prepared nothing, and I made a very bad impression. And since then, I put myself into question, and I went back home and tried to find a public speaking course. And I realized I was not the only one to be afraid of an audience. And the three most important fears in the world are these, and public speaking ranges third. People are afraid of speaking in front of an audience. It was a discovery. I didn't feel alone from that point of view. And then I discovered there are so many people that have difficulties to stay in front of an audience. Barbara Streisand, in a concert in 1972, she forgot the words of her song, and for 27 years she didn't hold a concert. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, speaks at universities. He has the shivers, for example. And Adele, for example, Adele is scared before getting onto the stage in Amsterdam. She didn't get onto the stage because she puked, and she puked in another occasion in front of her assistant. And people that should be accustomed to be in front of an audience, they have difficulties. When you have to deliver a presentation, there are presentations and contributions that make you sleep. Some of them are boring, some of them are neutral and stimulating. 43%, 40% make you sleep, 44% are boring, 13 neutral, and just 3% of the presentations are stimulating. So, the objective that some way or another we set when this book was published was making our experience of 20 years of public speaking teaching at all levels, enclosing it all into a book, and the title is Le Tre Porte del Public Speaking, the three doors of the public speaking. I wrote it with two co-authors, Miranda Sorgente. She's considered the coach of coaches and trainer of trainers. She is the author of so many books, and Silva is an editor, copywriter, special experience in coaching, and she deals with interior alchemy, and the book is subdivided into three main chapters. It's the three doors of public speaking. Now we'll see what it means. Connect, create, and communicate. Connect, first door. Connect. What does it mean, connect? It means connection with your internal part, being connected with higher intelligence, being connected with your heart, starting from yourself, putting yourself into question to give something new outside. If we don't have this step, internal step, it's difficult to communicate outside effectively and being persuasive. So we should try and put ourselves into question. It's just like connecting and getting into that state of full confidence where we can find the answers we want to find. It's not easy, but that's what we do in the book. One of the ways to find inspiration when I have to prepare a presentation, or when I work on a presentation that some way or another can help me express or submit a product to a company, inspiration inside the book is transformed into something more. Before we spoke about meditation, and inspiration can become inhaling, and I can identify those concepts that can be useful for a presentation. And meditation is a wide theme in the book. It's not the only one to find inspiration, but it's important because when we meditate, something happens. The orange juice, when you take an orange juice and you turn it with a spoon, all the pieces of the orange rotate in the whirl. It's just like what happens in our mind when we think, and when you end turning, the heavy elements go to the surface, and part of the mind is left neutral, transparent. That's what happens during meditation. We can easily focus, and having the answers we're striving for. Also creative responses. And we speak about creativity now in the second chapter, in the second door, the so-called create. And what is creativity? I've been dealing with creativity for so many years, and I found a wonderful definition by Henri Poincaré. Creativity is uniting existing elements with new connections that can be useful. And it was also stated by Steve Jobs, creativity means putting things things in connection. Why is creativity important? It's important in all the jobs we do, not just communication, because when we build a creative communication, the perception that we give to people in front of us is immediately a perception that is not usual to them, and our attention is attracted, and we devote more attention to what we do. For example, in presentations, using creativity also means using metaphors. They can be visual and textual, and metaphor is a super effective form of communication. It takes us beyond with the mind. It simplifies concepts, and when I should tell something complex, also inside a technical presentation, if I use metaphors, it becomes more simple to deliver a message. Speaking about creativity, in the book we also tackle something else, the creation or construction of the presentation also graphically. In the book, that's also we talk about how can we build an effective presentation. And very often I saw presentations of this kind. Rich presentations and also presentations of major speakers that had a wonderful message to give, and they were well prepared, but very often the ability of the speaker didn't correspond to the quality of what was displayed. When I project such a slide, what happens? Nobody looks at the speaker. They try and read what the slide contains, and that's where the attention ends, and the speaker isn't at the center of the attention. So building presentations also graphically has got its own logic. There are certain features that should be complied with when you create a presentation. That's the introduction, the index, key words, little test. I'd like to give an example. For example, index pages. When the presentation is complex, index pages, and these are graphical examples of index pages. Index pages help us. Index pages help people listening create in their own minds boxes ready to be filled. And they help us and get us ready for what comes next. These are graphical examples that you find in the book. The chapter pages. Chapter pages are important. Dividing one chapter from the other helps. These are examples, and it helps. It helps people take some breath and be ready for what comes after. It helps us make a pause in our presentation. Another important theme is how to create slides in terms of content, very little text and keywords. These are the examples. I can speak 50 minutes about such a slide. I avoid writing so much. It's me speaking, and I just need keywords. When I have a real need to write something more, that's what I can do at the most. Very few lines, because such very few lines distract the attention. So the message is this. And another theme is represented by images. Inside a presentation, images can make a difference. Why? Dr. John Medina says, if I listen to part of the information, I forget about it after 3 days. But if I add an image, this image will stay in my mind easily than just words and voice. Why? Because 90% of neural perceptors are visual. This is also taught by neural language programming. Most people are visual. They communicate by images and absorb by images. Another important statistics of university, it says that 10% people remember 10% of what they hear, 10% of what they read, 30% of what they see. But if we unite sight with voice, we're more effective in communicating our message. Here you have some graphical examples. It's a slide that has got its own dignity, but if I put in a picture, you see, it gets more interesting. Just like in this case, if I want to really reach you, I add a picture, and pictures can help us tell something more. And then there's a theme that is always not so highly considered, infographics. And infographics has a meaning that allows us to understand information better. Infographics has a likelihood that is 30 times higher to be read than a text. There are different types of infographics. Some of them are complex and others are easy. In the book, we have a list of websites where you can download infographics ready to be used just to fill out, or some sites with $2. If they send the information, they send it back. It's interesting. And the last door is communicate. So we have created our presentation, we have connected with ourselves to find answers and inspiration, and the last phase has to do with technique, suggestions on how to stay in front of an audience. For example, the posture of the captain of a ship. Sometimes you see speakers a bit twisted, and captain of the ship, when you drive a ship, you are proud, and these 2 millimeters allow me to protrude the chest and open my chest, just like a thread, pulling it out and using hands and arms when you need it. If you've noticed it, international speakers don't move so much, they don't make so many gestures. Use your arms, move on the stage. I'm moving. One of the rules is that when I want to say something important, I stop. Yes, last night I saw a corporate manager, and he was never stopping on the stage. He was coming, going, always walking, and there were 2 video cameras, a fixed video camera and one that was supposed to shoot the face. And the cameraman had so many difficulties, and sometimes you have to stop. Then another step, look at everybody. One of the rules is to try and look at everybody. When the audience is wide, if I look at the first few rows, in the last rows, they perceive my eyes, and just as if I were looking at them. And one of the mistakes you make at the beginning is keep on looking at the person that is not looking at us. There are people you've seen their cell phone, and don't focus on those people. It's a piece of advice. Focus on people smiling at us, paying attention, but not those that do not look at us. It's a useless effort. The pitch of the voice. When you deliver a presentation, there are moments when it's useful to lower the tone of your voice. The more I lower the tone of my voice, the more people try and follow me. And it's important to change the pitch of the voice, the tone of the voice. Smile. It might seem simple, but if you have a speaker that doesn't smile, the speaker seems a bit angry. It's not nice. Perhaps he says interesting things, but smiling, it doesn't mean laughing, but smiling, it helps saying something. And when I start a speech, I tend to say well, and 90% of people use well before starting speaking and avoid it, and do not dwindle, oscillate. And you see people oscillating just like this. Don't do it. The idea is to stand still, just like the roots of a tree, and the bottom part is stable. and in the top part I can move, I can do what I want, but when you stop you should be sound. Okay. Love letters. I'm an expert at love letters.
Darti i colori più belli, voglio baciarti.
I want our world to be a single one. I'd like to see from your eyes, and I like to be your shadow, and so on and so forth. That's a poem by Frida Kahlo that you know, devoted to her lover back then, Giuseppe Bartoli, and it has to do with presentations of the love letter, because when you build a presentation, it's just like writing a love letter. If I don't know who my audience is, how can I structure a presentation that it can be effective? When I write a love letter, if I don't know whom I'm writing it to, I cannot think about an unknown lover. When you prepare a presentation, imagine you write a love letter to all of those we devote our presentation to. And it's important because I should understand who my audience is before meeting it. I should understand what they want to hear, what they want to know, and the problems I can solve for them, and what persuasive themes may be, and what especially you'd like them to do after they have listened to you. Do you want to sell a product? Do you want to be employed? Do you want to sell a service? Do you want to make your company known? That should be the main objective. And so today I should convince you to buy a book, basically.
All'interno dell'ultimo capitolo si parla di storytelling.
Inside our last chapter we speak about storytelling, and it's an abused term. We should also say that the human brain is predisposed to listening to stories. Since we were children, we devote attention to people telling stories, and storytelling creates a high degree of attention in people, especially when the story is inside also a technical presentation. It can help us. If you remember the image I showed you with the stones, there are different ways to tell stories. You never use the past tense. It should have really happened, because if I invented it, people understand you. And it should be rich in details. It should be based on personal life. I spoke about a river, the humid day, the person I met. The more details I can include in my story, my presentation, the more people create their own idea about it, and they devote attention. I usually open my speeches with a story, and perhaps that story has nothing to do with what people expect, but everybody pays attention. And then the story is a metaphor, and it should be laid back to the main theme, but it is used to attract the attention. And stories generate emotions. And Aristotle taught us so much, and as much to do. He said that right effective presentation is made up of 3 chapters. First of all, docere, informing on the object of the speech; delectare, to please the audience; but movere, stirring emotions. And if you don't have emotions, well, it's difficult, and emotions make a difference. Why does it make the difference? The etymology of the word emotion means putting into motion. If I can use the right levers, what happens in my audience is that the emotion generates an action. It's fundamental in all of our presentations. If you just listen and do nothing after, something didn't work. Such a thesis is used by traditional communication. If in a communication you don't have emotions, it's not effective. Richard Thaler, it was awarded Nobel Prize for the Economy. He said that also in the field of the economy, gut plays the lion's share, and if it works at a very high level, imagine when you introduce your product to your company, numbers are not enough. You need numbers, but we should speak to the heart of people, not to the head of people, and the emotion from this perspective helps us. Okay. I leave you with the three things I'd like you to bring home of public speaking contained in this book. First of all, the importance of being connected with yourselves. If you don't start from yourself, it's difficult to get connected to the others. Connected with yourselves, it can be done with meditation, with sports, when you walk. And being connected with yourselves means having the ability to find the right inspiration, right answers at the right moment. And that's what we talk about in the book. And the emotion speaks to the heart. Just like I said before, if I cannot stir emotions in my audience, everything becomes flat.
Tema è raccontare storie.
Another theme is telling stories, and if we succeed to include inside a presentation our own personal story, and that can be laid back to the main theme, we attract the attention of people, and we can stir the interest of people because we are oriented to the listening of a story. And thinking about your audience and their needs, we spoke about the love letter. When we write a presentation, when we prepare it, imagine you write a love letter. There's an Indian saying that says, to know our interlocutors, you should walk 2 moons and 2 suns in their moccasins. What does it mean? Take time to understand who is in front of you, especially when with our company we speak about the product, we speak about the company. Try and understand who is in front of you, because as a function of that we can structure our presentation. And change rhythm and pitch of voice. Don't be monotonous. Making pauses is wonderful. Celentano taught us on TV some years ago. The more silent a person is on the stage, the more attention is generated, and the more I can make a pause between one communication and the other, and the easier it is that people devote more attention to what I'm going to say. Inspiration and creativity can be fed. Just like we've seen, meditation is one of the ways to receive inspiration. Van Gogh used absinthe. Absinthe is a bit more complex to use today. I do not invite you to use it, but when you have to create a campaign, take a minute, take 1.5 minutes and stop all of your thoughts, just like the orange juice. When the orange juice stops moving, there's no whirl, all the solid elements go to the surface, and in the bottom it's crystal clear. And that's just like in the case of the mind, it can get inspired. Be bold and get out of the box. And using examples is of great importance because people in front of you are not accustomed to it. And each time you take a step out of your comfort zone, I grow. Comfort zone, you know what it is. It's that area where you are reassured. If I do something I never did, if I do it, I've increased a bit the size of my comfort area. If day after day I add small pieces, after 1 month I've taken a big step forward. Another theme that is very important on February 17th, remember to buy my book because it will be published. in bookstores and online. I have some copies here, and the publisher gave them to me. Max, can I ask you a question? And then I know that you have questions.
Rispondere.
So education and training, for me it is very important. And what do you mean by that? It means challenging oneself. If you decide to do something for yourself, a training, a course, we discover that we have a great potential for improvement. And we discover that potential by challenging ourselves. When I told you about when I started in 1991, I designed the records, and I thought I was great because my projects were successful. But when I challenged myself, I discovered my potential for improvement. So challenging oneself means accepting humbly that you must learn and you have to continue to learn. I discovered something some time ago, which is a sort of a dogma. The future illiterate will be those who will not have the power to learn, to unlearn, and to learn again. And this is something that we somehow discovered during the COVID pandemic. We challenged the relationship we've had with people, our way of working, and we were forced to do so. But we should not forget that we have always something to learn. And finally, technique and heart. In my book, in our book, it's all about techniques. Public speaking is a technique. But if I don't put my heart, if I don't put my passion into it, I run the risk of being a robot. It's like some years ago in Publitalia, when people were all the same. Mr. Berlusconi developed one way of speaking, which was effective, but without heart and emotions. It's like this object, you know, through a technique, I can create a beautiful package, and I can even convince you to buy it, because inside this package there may be a precious watch or a jewel. But I have to be consistent, you know, in what I'm saying, because when you go home and you open the box and you discover that there's no jewel inside but a brick, well, you fail and you lose whatever you may have earned before that. But this brick wants to be something. Louis Kant, architect and philosopher, said also a brick wants to be something. A brick has aspirations. A brick wants to be something. Even a common sheer brick wants to be something more, something better. And this is what I wish to you all. I wish you can be the best of yourself, you can become better than what you are now. And I hope and I wish that you can meet many other bricks in your life so that you can improve. Thank you very much. So you have a question, right? Yes, I have a question. So I would say you already have a topic for your next book. You teach, we follow your suggestions, we find our own identity, we approach the audience in an interesting way, we speak in a stimulating way. But how can an audience understand whether there's fake behind that? Well, I was at a presentation some time ago, and the speaker was telling about a personal experience, a very sad personal experience, and he added a music to his presentation to make it even more sad and emotional. And well, I realized that he was performing, and when you perform during a presentation, it's all fake, so you're lying. Well, this is a technique again, but a technique without heart and without passion cannot work. And so you can understand whether a person is telling things without being sincere. It's like doing things without using heart. Well, the risk is limited when we talk about product design, but this is a very dangerous weapon in the hands of politicians. It would be interesting to have a book about, written about how to recognize these fake presentations, because you may have a speaker who's very good with a great knowledge, but how can you realize whether he is a fake? Neurolinguistics has provided a lot of techniques on how to somehow manipulate the person in front of you. And another topic, again related to neurolinguistics, is the following. Well, I had a presentation some years ago, and one of the people listening to me probably read a book on neurolinguistic programming. And in order to establish a relationship with another person, you have to try and reflect what you see. So in order to establish a better relationship, you should act as your interlocutor. And I saw, for example, that when I bent, he bent. When I realized that I started playing with gestures. And then I said, okay, I realized that you may have read some books, but let's stop because it's becoming ridiculous. Well, this is just an example, but there are specific techniques. For example, neurolinguistics says that if you want to speak to a child, you have to bend and to be at his eyes height. And this is really incredible for communication. If you can adapt to the person in front of you, it's fantastic. This is not manipulation. It can be manipulating, but if I'm doing so in order to improve the relationship with my counterpart, I improve the result. Well, I don't have a very loud voice, and if the person in front of me is much louder, I can hardly establish a relationship. So if I want to go towards the other person, I have to raise the volume of my voice, but this may be manipulating, of course. A piece of advice, it happened to me, I hope it will never happen again. I was in China or in Korea, and I had a public speech on eyewear, I think, and the audience was made up of Asian people with a fully different face mimic. I was speaking in English. They had no expression on their face, and I could not realize and I could not understand whether they were understanding. And then I saw some English-speaking people who were sending some signals to me, and I stared at them, unfortunately, the whole time to try and understand whether they could understand what I was saying. Well, this is an extreme case because I was speaking a language which was not their mother tongue, and with different somatic traits that are different to interpret. What piece of advice would you give? Change in the tone of voice to try and understand whether they understand what I'm saying. You should involve them with questions, so prepare questions to understand whether they're listening to you. Try and involve them, trying to get the answer in advance to a question that you're going to pose afterwards. So involving the audience is also a way to keep the attention alive. And this is another piece of advice. So if you had prepared yourself previously, you would have known that this is the way they are. It's not that they don't pay attention, but for example, I discovered that some colors do not work in China. I had a company in Hong Kong. I had to adapt certain methods. Puns, for example, do not work there, and the rhetoric, the irony are different from ours. And so we have first of all to understand who our audience are. Any other questions, curiosity? So you are free. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I had fun. I hope you had too.